I titled today's mind map, Through the Eye of the Infinite. In today's conversation, I'd like to explore some nuances of the following quote from the Kabbalion, and I believe it'll be very helpful for creating the life that you want, as it has been for me. This has applications for relationships, entrepreneurship, artistic endeavors, which we'll focus on today, and you'll also find applications in all areas of your life. In the Principle of Polarity chapter, it states, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. Now, the part of the paradox of everything is dual and identical at the same time is symbolic of fluidity of mind, where one can look beyond bias to see it for how it truly is in relation to their vision, which happens automatically while you're in flow, free from the unnecessary bias caused by certain beliefs that cause reactivity, or in relation to the quote, polarization. Polarization in a not-so-ideal way, let's say, yet helpful for transformation to reveal what belief is identified with so it can be released. So the entire understanding of this quote can be summed up as just be how you truly desire to be. Or I like how Steve Jobs said it in his commencement speech. Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. So as you allow yourself to be how you truly desire to be, from your heart, beyond listening to unnecessary opinions of this world, realizing how they are secondary to the matters of the heart, what happens is the inner reconciliation, which reflects as ideal relationships, ideal creative expressions, ideal invention, ideal innovation, and these expressions are experienced in all areas of your life. Living this way, you also see beyond the unnecessary beliefs, even the ones held to dogmatic conviction, the ones where one may have been deeply identified with, which weren't actually ideal for them. Remember, as we discussed in Sunday's video, you are formless awareness, and you choose your ideal attributes. Commune with your own heart. You know what is lovely and true. Now, to appreciate and live experientially this quote from the Kabbalion, let's explore divergent, convergent, and lateral thinking. When a person lives from how they desire to be, they experience flow more so, and lateral thinking, or we could say lateral being, which facilitates the inner reconciliation of paradoxes, and it is experienced as an expression of them as the outer aspects of our life. Artistic expression, innovation, relationships, etc. Someone who is thinking divergently has the ability to think from many different perspectives, paradigms, viewpoints, and nuances. And this can be helpful. However, if a person is over-identified with divergent thinking, rather than being in flow about it, they may find themselves overthinking and trapped by perfectionism. This trap is a mental trap. It is a symptom of a person not allowing themselves to be in flow and embrace experientially the principle of polarity. And I've identified 3 ways, which we'll discuss later, of releasing from this mental trap to transmute perfectionism into joy and appreciation for nuance. And then we have convergent thinking, which is sequential thinking. For example, if I think A, then B will change, and then C will occur. And if it does, I'm going to do D, in which then E, F, or G could occur, although most likely G, in which then we'll do H, which will lead to I, then J, and K occurring, etc. This is logical thinking, which is helpful for engineering business models and systems, to which I have many years of experience doing for companies. And while this is helpful, this could be limited if divergent viewpoints are not kept into consideration to a nice ratio. Keeping into consideration, for example, variations, fluctuations, sudden changes, and nuances of the marketplace in business or environment. So one way, divergent thinking or convergent thinking, is not ultimately better than another. It is helpful to think, and because of the degree of nuance, feel divergently, while also integrating convergent thinking. Now, rather than having to decide when to apply one or the other for whatever application of your choice, we can actually allow it to happen automatically while we're in flow. And if we find that we're biasing, we'll talk about how to release that later on to remain in our flow. And in remaining in our flow, we experience lateral thinking, which is actually a combination of both. We can call this a balanced approach, or harmonious approach, or ideal being, flow state. And I also find it's both thinking and feeling harmoniously, laterally. And then we realize that this quote from the Kabbalion makes perfect sense. And also keep into consideration, it does not necessarily mean 50-50. It means ideal harmonious ratio depending on the application. So let's look at it again. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. So in last week's video, which I'll link in the description too, I mentioned beta, alpha, theta, delta, and gamma brainwaves. I recommend checking it out. Alpha brainwave is where we experience a lateral way of being. And while operating from this state, we automatically release identification to unhelpful beliefs in relation to what we are doing, and we allow a nice ratio of divergent and convergent viewpoints, which, if you are an entrepreneur, it's experienced in your innovation, invention, conversations with your team, clients, prospects, etc. Everything appears harmoniously. If you're an artist, you experience a flowing, enjoyable experience during your artistic expressions, as your skill is cultivated and your creative genius is expressed. In communication with another, we experience stimulating insight, brought forth for exploration and integration in a fun, joyous way, beyond unnecessary argument and confrontation, rather a harmonious relationship, one of mutual sharing and deep understanding. So this is also a distinction between perfectionism and someone in flow who values nuance. They both have the same goal for further refinement. However, the state they operate from differs. I define perfectionism as mental and emotional rigidity, which we can see expressed as physical rigidity in these creative contexts, caused by identifying with unnecessary self-imposed force and control-based subconscious beliefs, to the point where one becomes overly critical, overly picky, and judgmental towards themselves and others, rather than enjoying the experience, enjoying the learning, and enjoying the growth. And in contrast, operating from flow and valuing nuance is enjoying the experience, and if applicable, the process of skill cultivation between where you are in your skill and further refining it with each attempt is experienced as a fun journey. Enjoying the nuances of insights and perspectives, and if applicable, integrating them in a natural way, not forceful, controlling, or frustrating. This is a totally different energy and experience from perfectionism, and one that is energizing and vitalizing. So we want to value nuance, subtle distinctions, without perfectionism. For example, I snowboard, and a perfectionist may compare themselves to others, how they performed in the past, in an unhealthy way, where they feel that they're not worthy, not having fun and enjoying each run, and that ends up being an unpleasant experience. And while they may be cultivating skill, the way they go about it is exhausting. Flowing and valuing nuance is where we have fun, enjoy each run, and reflect as applicable on how we can optimize the performance in a lighthearted way. This also magically seems to bring out optimal performance on its own. And throughout the process, we feel energized, vitalized, and we have a lot of fun. The same is noted in conversations. If it's perfectionism-based, I find them exhausting and not fun at all. If in flow and stimulating nuanced perspectives in a fun way, it's optimal. We learn, we grow, we also enjoy the conversation. We also find that we learn and grow faster, which is actually what the perfectionist wants. And by them not facilitating a pleasant experience, although they may still be learning happening, it is experienced as unnecessarily restrictive, stressful, and thus limiting. In the Kabbalion, it states, the Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the difference between things seemingly diametrically opposed to each other is a matter of degree. It teaches that the pair of opposites may be reconciled, and that thesis and antithesis are identical in nature but different in degree, and that the universal reconciliation of opposites is affected by a recognition of this principle of polarity. Now let's look at another example of nuance as they articulate in the book. It says, then passing on to the physical plane, they illustrate the principle by showing that heat and cold are identical in nature, the difference being merely a matter of degrees. The thermometer shows many degrees of temperature, the lowest pole being called cold, and the highest heat. Between these two poles are many degrees of heat or cold. Call them either, and you are equally correct. The higher of the 2 degrees is always warmer, while the lower is always colder. There is no absolute standard, as all is a matter of degree. The very terms high and low, which we are compelled to use, are but poles of the same thing. The terms are relative. So, for example, let's say you arrive home and you notice that you are feeling cold. You walk up to the digital thermometer, if you have a digital one, and you may turn it up a degree or 2 or a few, whatever to suit your taste. You wouldn't necessarily turn it up all the way unless perhaps for a short period of time to warm up your place faster. And even then, eventually you'll choose an ideal temperature. The temperature represents a degree, which we could consider desirable. You have a nuanced palette for temperature, and you might even find that you like certain temperatures during the summer, the winter, day and evening, while you're sleeping, etc. The same is to be said while you cook. You may like having a certain amount of salt to suit your tastes. You have a palate for how much salt you like, and this could vary depending on the dish or your mood. Nuance variation, more or less. The answer is it depends. So if we would like to have a flow-based life, we want to tune into our taste, varying degree of what we would consider to be ideal. And this could vary from one person to another. A harmonious relationship, for example, is thus then tuning into the preference of yourself while combining that with emotional intelligence with another to uncover a mutually enjoyable equilibrium. And this is always possible. Our ability to discover this nuance and equilibrium within depends on whether or not we are open to the possibility. If we close ourselves off to the possibility, we may find conflict, unnecessary force, and frustration in the relationship, trying to force it in a direction that we don't actually want from our heart, not allowing ourselves to discover the nuanced variation within of what we really want. So we could see here the benefit of being open to possibility, the nuanced variation, that there really is an ideal way between two seeming opposites that can be found which works out ideally. Beyond the forceful, biased approach, which again is a nuanced variation between the two that can be found if a person is open to it, open to possibility, tune themselves to what they really want, revealed by their intuition and their own heart. Again, the Steve Jobs quote, "Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary." So what causes a person to be biased to one way or another, even if it's not helpful, or perfectionism, which distorts listening to their heart and intuition? Well, beliefs, and more accurately put, certain fight or flight-based beliefs they have overly identified with along the way. And these beliefs are actually looking to be released. They might not be allowing themselves to release them. Instead, they maintain a pattern of subconsciously allowing themselves to become polarized to one way or another, and it is revealed by their emotions. For example, let's say someone watched the news, and an opinion was shared where they experienced a fight or flight response by what they see, and more accurately put, their belief about what they see. They then allow themselves to become reactive to that belief, rather than taking on a more nuanced approach in regards to whatever is being shared. They bias then in a direction that is not ideal, via this fight or flight-based belief. And no shame and condemnation. They have the opportunity to practice depolarization, which will release identification to that belief. And by doing this, they will also process emotions in a healthy way and no longer find themselves polarized to that kind of information if it shows up. Instead, they will know clearly what to do or not do, freeing from bias, and they will listen to their heart and intuition and move forward accordingly, ideally. You see, emotion is energy in motion, and they're looking to be released. If we subconsciously block them through these beliefs from moving through our body, we could not only find ourselves repeatedly polarized by experiences in the outer world, certain experiences. These emotions could build up further, and then we could be easily polarized to that same information like puppets by our own beliefs. And if a person has not learned to process their emotions in a healthy way, I remember reading one time that this could lead to certain types of coping behaviors like disassociating, perfectionism, judging ourselves, and being critical of others, all of which seems to cause a person to not experience the joy of nuance and authenticity, applying the principle of polarity automatically, the way we were authentically designed to live. So rather than being at the whim, I recommend applying the following if you find yourself polarized, and allow the emotions to flow in a healthy way, not suppressing them. Also allowing the unhelpful belief identification to be released, and then you'll know what to do or not do, intuition in relation to your experience, which will reveal the nuance. They are, number 1, change how you relate. Number 2, observe the way it is. Number 3, do something different. Now, which one of these are better? Well, this is where you have an opportunity to find which one or what combination works best for you, as I find that they all do the same thing for me, and in different situations, I apply different ones. So let's say you're about to become biased or reactive, which is a past belief playing out. And even if you have already become reactive, these still apply. The goal here is to not suppress or repress the emotion, release the emotion. Allow it to flow in a healthy way alongside releasing the identification to the belief. And then you'll discover the nuanced distinction. You'll find it within. Intuition, or the change, whatever you desire, may happen on its own. The change happens in unknown ways, from the silence. Number one, you can change how you relate to it. For example, if someone says something to you that seems to be doubt-based, see it for how you would like to see it, ideally from your vision. This releases the emotion, allows it to flow, and also the belief that seems to play out, in which the other may be revealing. I find this is the easiest, as I have many belief tools I can pull to initiate any change I'd like to see. That's what beliefs are, tools. And you could use them as applicable and place them aside in your mental toolbox without becoming overly identified with them. I recommend my subconscious mind program, which I'll link to in the description if you'd like this ability. It's powerful. They then say the same thing you imagine them to say, which is mutually ideal. The second is observation. Sometimes I say mere observation, which is pure observation. This is where I observe without bias. Simply observe the emotion, which releases the emotion and biased belief along with it, allowing it to flow out of you. I don't label it or judge it. I allow it to flow. From there, the nuanced idea that is ideal, could be a variation of whatever it is between two poles, reveals itself. Number three, do something different. So I go for a walk, do a meditation to release the subconscious control and identification to the belief. And then I'm no longer polarized by whatever showed up. What's also interesting, as I mentioned in last Thursday's video, I go snowboarding if I become overly identified with beta brainwave. Same time when I'm snowboarding, I'm having fun, refining my ability. And if I notice that I'm no longer having fun, I've gone more into a beta brainwave, I switch to taking notes for my videos, and then I feel inspired to go back on the slopes again. Now, if by doing this, the belief seems to persist, you can note that down and release it through self-talk or autosuggestion. So this is all about releasing force and control to reveal the nuance beyond perfectionism, which the perfectionism is caused by certain beliefs polarized to an outer world aspect, revealing the biased belief in mind, resulting in not enjoying the experience to reveal the nuance, which is ideal. And so a variation of one or another of doing these things will release the bias, and you'll discover the nuance variation. And your being also becomes more refined, which again is how you genuinely like to be, which then you'll see expressed in your creative expression, innovation, invention, relationships, all areas of your life actually, in a fun, joyous, blissful way. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an autosuggestion to further encourage. You could say, I have the ability to see infinite possibilities, and I am able to experience it more so each day in a joyous, lighthearted way. I apply what is applicable to the different areas of my life in an effortless way, and I connect to the nuances of how I authentically desire to be and live from those ideals, which show up in the various areas of my life in an ideal way. This way is a priority for me as I release control and allow the infinite within to reveal the nuanced ideas in my imagination, the desires of my heart, to live from as an authentic, joyous way of life. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.